Chapter 5: The Final Revelation. The next day, a group of local historians and paranormal investigators arrived at the house, responding to rumors of the strange occurrences that had plagued the property. They found the house so rawly silent, its doors and windows sealed tight. The once vibrant trees around the property now seemed to loom ominously, their branches gnarled and twisted, as if the very land had been corrupted by the malevolence that had taken hold of the house. The leader of the group, a seasoned paranormal investigator named Dr. Evelyn Marsh, approached the front door. She had heard the stories of the O'Connors and the strange events surrounding the renovation of the old house, but nothing could have prepared her for the overwhelming sense of dread that washed over her as she stepped onto the porch. "This place, it feels wrong," one of the investigators, a young man named Kyle, muttered as he followed her. His voice shook with unease, like something's watching us. Dr. Marsh nodded, her expression grim. "Stay close, everyone. We don't know what we're dealing with here." They forced the door open, the wood groaning in protest as if it hadn't been opened in years. Inside, the house was cold and dark, the air thick with the scent of decay. Dust hung in the air, undisturbed, and the faint whispers of the past seemed to echo through the empty halls. As they moved through the house, the group felt the walls closing in around them, the oppressive atmosphere almost unbearable. Every shadow seemed to flicker with movement. Every creak of the floorboards sent a jolt of fear through their hearts. They reached the living room, where the trapdoor lay open, its dark maw gaping like an entryway to hell. Dr. Marsh shone her flashlight down the stone steps, the beam cutting through the darkness to reveal the cold, damp walls of the underground chamber below. "This is where they went," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is where they found the graves." The group descended the steps, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. As they reached the bottom, they were met with the same sight that had greeted Jenna and Mark. The rows of stone slabs, the symbols carved into the stone, the air thick with the scent of earth and death. But the chamber wasn't empty. The ghostly figures that had haunted Jenna and Mark still lingered, their tortured forms shimmering in the darkness. They turned their hollow eyes toward the newcomers, their expressions filled with an unspeakable agony. Undisturbed, and the faint whispers of the past seemed to echo through the empty halls. As they moved through the house, the group felt the walls closing in around them, the oppressive atmosphere almost unbearable. Every shadow seemed to flicker with movement. Every creak of the floorboards sent a jolt of fear through their hearts. They reached the living room, where the trapdoor lay open, its dark maw gaping like an entryway to hell. Dr. Marsh shone her flashlight down the stone steps, the beam cutting through the darkness to reveal the cold, the empty walls of the underground chamber below. "This is where they went," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is where they found the graves." The group descended the steps, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. As they reached the bottom, they were met with the same sight that had greeted Jenna and Mark. The rows of stone slabs, the symbols carved into the stone, the air thick with the scent of earth and death. But the chamber wasn't empty. The ghostly figures that had haunted Jenna and Mark still lingered, their tortured forms shimmering in the darkness. They turned their hollow eyes toward the newcomers, their expressions filled with an unspeakable agony. The investigators froze, their hearts pounding with terror as the spirits approached. But this time, the ghosts did not attack. Instead, they moved past the living, as if searching for something or someone. Dr. Marsh felt a cold chill as one of the ghosts passed through her, its icy touch sending a jolt of fear through her body. She realized then that the spirits were not after the living. They were searching for their tormentor, the dark force that had bound them to this place. "They're trapped here," she said, her voice trembling. "They can't move on because of whatever's keeping them bound to this place." One of the investigators, a middle-aged woman named Claire, stepped forward. "Maybe we can help them," she suggested. "If we can find the source of the evil that's keeping them here, maybe we can free them." Dr. Marsh nodded, though she wasn't sure how they could possibly defeat such a malevolent force. But she knew they had to try. They moved deeper into the chamber, searching for any clue that might lead them to the source of the evil. As they approached the sacrificial altar, the air grew colder, the walls seeming to pulse with dark energy. The symbols carved into the stone glowed faintly, their lines pulsing with a sickly, greenish light. "This is it," Dr. Marsh said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is where the rituals were performed." Kyle shuddered, stepping back from the altar. "It feels wrong, like it's alive somehow." As they examined the altar, they noticed something they hadn't seen before: a small, hidden compartment beneath the stone slab. Dr. Marsh pried it open, revealing a collection of ancient, brittle scrolls and a black, leather-bound book. The book was old, the pages yellowed with age, the leather cover cracked and worn. Dr. Marsh opened it carefully, her hands trembling as she read the faded script. "It's a grimoire," she said, her voice trembling with fear. "A book of dark magic. It describes the rituals that were performed here. Rituals meant to bind the spirits of the dead to this place, to use their torment as a source of power." The group exchanged horrified glances. They realized then that the house itself was a conduit, a vessel for the dark energy generated by the rituals. The spirits were trapped, their suffering fueling the malevolent force that had taken hold of the house. "We have to destroy it," Claire said, her voice filled with determination. "We have to break the connection." Dr. Marsh nodded. "But how?" "The magic that binds this place is ancient and powerful. It's not something that can be easily undone." Kyle looked around the chamber, his gaze falling on the symbols carved into the stone. "Maybe we don't have to undo it. Maybe we just have to weaken it. Disrupt the symbols, break the connection." It was a risky plan, but it was the only one they had. They set to work, using whatever tools they had to scratch out the symbols, break the lines, and disrupt the patterns. The air around them grew colder, the shadows lengthening as they worked, as if the very walls were fighting back. As they defaced the final symbol, a low, rumbling growl echoed through the chamber. The ground shook, the walls shuddering as the malevolent force fought to maintain its hold. But the damage had been done. The connection was weakening, the dark energy dissipating. The spirits that had been bound to the house for so long began to fade, their forms flickering as they were released from their torment. Dr. Marsh felt a surge of hope as she watched the spirits ascend, their faces finally at peace. But before they could celebrate, the chamber was plunged into darkness. The ground beneath them trembled violently, the air filled with the deafening roar of the malevolent force's final, desperate attempt to maintain control. "Run!" Dr. Marsh shouted, grabbing Kyle and Claire as the chamber began to collapse around them. They scrambled back through the tunnel, the walls crumbling as they went. The house itself seemed to be imploding, the dark force consuming everything in its path. They burst through the trapdoor just as the living room collapsed into the chamber below, the house groaning as it was torn apart from within. They didn't stop running until they were outside, the cold night air hitting them like a wall. They turned to watch as the house, the source of so much pain and suffering, collapsed in on itself, a final act of destruction. For a moment, there was silence. Then, as the dust settled, they saw it a faint, shimmering light rising from the ruins. The souls of the dead finally free to move on. Dr. Marsh felt tears welling up in her eyes as she watched the light fade into the night sky. They had done it. They had broken the curse, freed the spirits, and put an end to the darkness that had haunted the house for so long. But as the ruins of the house lay smoldering behind them, Dr. Marsh couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't truly over. The dark force may have been weakened, but it wasn't destroyed. It had simply retreated, waiting for another opportunity to rise again. As they drove away from the property, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon, Dr. Marsh vowed that she would be ready. She would continue to study the dark magic that had bound the house, and she would find a way to destroy it once and for all. But for now, the nightmare was over. The house was gone, the spirits were free, and the darkness had been driven back. Jenna and Mark, though lost to the darkness, had not died in vain. The house on the hill, once a place of dreams, was now a memory, a cautionary tale of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface, waiting to be discovered. And though the land would eventually heal, the scars of what had happened there would remain. A reminder of the evil that had once thrived in the darkness below. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Dr. Marsh drove away, leaving the cursed land behind. But she knew that the battle was not yet over. There were other places, other houses, other sites of ancient power where the darkness still lingered, and she would be ready. Years later, the land where the house once stood remained empty, a barren patch of earth surrounded by the forest. The locals avoided it, telling stories of a house that had collapsed and the strange events that had led to its destruction. But one day, a new couple arrived in town, drawn by the allure of the quiet, secluded land. They purchased the property, oblivious to its history, eager to build their dream home. As they broke ground for the foundation, the workers uncovered something strange and old. rusted iron ring embedded in the earth, attached to a trapdoor. And so, the cycle began anew.